The reason why this acronym was invented is because we tend to avoid reading manuals. We much prefer asking somebody, maybe the creator of the technology we're trying to learn, or asking Google, or lately, of course, asking LLMs, which can be a great starting point. This is just an example. I was asking GPT-4 to tell me about foreign data in Postgres, and it's a great attempt. It's just that there are limitations and hallucinations, as we all know. And really, the real knowledge comes from the manual. Unfortunately, it's a bit cut. It's okay. Okay. So that's where the real knowledge comes from. This was written by humans. It takes a lot of effort, and it has additional things like links to other resources that you're going to need if you want to master a specific technology. So my recommendation is to be as familiar as you can with the manual. You don't have to read absolutely everything. You will not have time. But since it takes so much effort to write a good manual, anyone who has had to write documentation knows that it's really hard to go from complex ideas into a clear explanation on how to use them. It takes a lot of love as well, because you have to empathize with your users. But reading a manual is much easier than writing one, and I think there's a lot of gold hidden in manuals. So why do we avoid reading them? I have a hypothesis. I think it's because it's not rewarding enough. The experience of going through dense paragraphs of technical language is not very rewarding. So let's make it more rewarding. I want to share 3 ways that you can apply to have a more enjoyable experience when you're reading manuals. The first is to build a mental map. The second is to take notes in your own language and to revisit both often. Okay, so building a mental map is key. If you're going to take away one thing from this talk, this is the most important one. Whenever you're approaching an unfamiliar topic, it makes sense to have a place to put everything you're learning. And a good way to do that initially is to compile a glossary. Basically, define every word, every concept that they're talking about that you might not understand, every acronym, every abbreviation, everything that confuses you. So at least you have all the pieces of the puzzle, even though you haven't put them together yet. Actually, this is one of the greatest barriers to understanding. A subject might appear very complicated just because you don't master the terminology. But once you know what all the words mean, it's much easier. So let's say you're learning Scala and you've never learned anything about functional programming. The Scala manual is actually good enough that it has a glossary section, but others don't, so you're going to have to come up with it on your own. There's going to be many words that you don't know what they mean, and you're going to have to define. So this is actually the first step that I take whenever I'm learning a new technology. I start my knowledge base, my personal knowledge base of things that I don't understand, and I just define them. Sometimes you're reading documentation, or you're going through a tutorial, or you're watching a video, somebody says, this is this, and you're like, okay, wait, let me write that down so I can reference it later. The next logical step is to go from I know what all the concepts are to I know how they all fit together. So the table of contents or the index of any technology you're using is going to be a great step. So if you have the top level categories of everything you could potentially learn, when you learn something new, you know where it fits. And it's easier to not get confused when you're learning something that is in a different category and you don't realize that there are different categories. So I basically copy and paste the index of the technologies that I use, and whenever I'm learning something new, like a foreign data is a way of creating a bridge between my external database, blah, 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 I know where to put it. The second step is taking notes, preferably in your own handwriting. If you can't explain something clearly enough, it's because you don't understand it yet. So you should definitely explain things in your own words. It makes everything easier. and it's more useful and fun than just reading. If somebody tells you, go read the manual, but you don't have a mission, like a specific goal that you want to try to answer, you will not get as much out of it. So your time will be wasted. But if you have a mission and you just want to explain something you just read to see if you really understand it, it's a more enjoyable experience. Here's an example from the Snowflake documentation, talking about the very sexy topic of access control requirements. This is the way they structure it. It's actually a great manual. It's super extensive, but this is not the way my brain is structured. I rather write things, point out exceptions that I've run into, problems I've had, and things like how to do X under this specific heading, because then I can come back to it later and see what I wrote. So this is the final piece, revisiting what you wrote. You're putting in effort to create your personal knowledge base. You should use it as much as possible. If you don't use it, it will just gather dust and you will basically, all that effort was wasted. So search for your notes first when you have a question. They're basically a gift that you gave to your future self. And I recommend using a single file. There's many ways of organizing information. You can use Notion, you can use Obsidian. There's a million different tools that will help you fix this problem. But I think this is one of those cases where simpler is always better. So just use a single file. It makes everything easier. And you can also stay in flow as you're going through it. So for example, I just have a file in Visual Studio Code. I can use regular expressions to look for things that are not easily searchable on the web. Good luck finding, like a specific comma that means something in JavaScript. Good luck finding that in the web, if you don't know that it's a specific operator. You can filter by headings, which makes navigation easier. Instead of just searching the whole text, you can just search all the headings that you got from the index. You can hide sections. This is super useful, and by not getting lost, the file can be as large as you want, but as long as you're in the section you care about, you're only seeing one screen. So you don't actually have to worry about having a big pile. And then you get instant bookmarks. It's like perfectly created to optimize your experience as a programmer. So here's my call to action. If you get something out of this talk, I hope you try to implement this. You probably had experiences in the past. See if this can work for you. Pick a technology that you would like to know more deeply. Of course, you don't have to learn all the technologies. Just pick one that would have the greatest impact in your professional career, that would give you the most joy if you were able to really master it. Just anything that you've always wanted to learn but felt intimidated by the amount of information you would have to acquire. If the process of acquiring information is enjoyable, then it doesn't matter how long it takes. The next step is finding the index. You can also use an index from a book if you prefer to not go straight to the documentation at the beginning, although I always recommend learning where the information comes from, where the source is. Once you have the index, pick a section, read it, something that seems unfamiliar but potentially useful, so it's a good use of your time. And then take notes. Start building your personal knowledge base. Write things the way your brain works, so you can revisit it 6 months from now and it feels like a gift. And then you will enjoy the feeling of becoming a master in that technology. That's the promise of spending time reading documentation. There's an actual payoff at the end. So I hope you will give this a try. Thank you to the sponsors, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yo tengo una duda. Muchas documentaciones a día de hoy vienen con este getting started, con este rollo de tal. Y veo que tú hablas directamente de la documentación, digamos, más tocha, más fuerte, ¿no? Mi experiencia con los getting started y todas estas cosas que suelen ser confusos precisamente porque dan por hecho que tú sabes cosas, que hay un mapa mental construido. ¿Tu take en esto cuál sería? ¿Ignorarlo, ir directamente a la chicha del asunto o sí que te resultan útiles?
Yo creo que cualquier enfoque que sea creado para principiantes, es potencialmente útil. Y si das un paso más y luego te preguntas, vale, todas estas cosas que me están enseñando, ¿de dónde vienen? Y ahí puedes encontrar que la guía que estás usando, el tutorial que estás usando, que te está enseñando esta tecnología, a lo mejor te parece más confuso que si vas a la fuente, ¿no? Si lo que te está enseñando para principiantes te está ayudando, perfecto. No tienes que entrar en modo hardcore ya desde el principio, ¿no? Sí, entonces, son complementarios.